Between 1837 and 1901, millions of young people navigated Victorian courtship, a minefield of strict rules, secret codes, and social death if you made one wrong move. The stakes were impossibly high, but somehow people still managed to flirt, fall in love, and get married without dying of embarrassment. Here's what dating was really like in the Victorian era. Hey, quick thing before we start. If you actually listen to these regularly, hit like or subscribe. I always wonder where everyone's at, so comment your city and what time it is. Weird to think some of you are having breakfast in London while I'm recording this at night here in the States. Alright, let's head back to London, 1862. Trust me, it's gonna be quite a ride. But first, get comfortable. Seriously, adjust those pillows, pull up that blanket, because where we're going, you're gonna want to be cozy. It's 6:15 in the morning, and you're about to wake up as 19-year-old Eleanor Hartwell. Your eyes flutter open to the dim grey light filtering through heavy damask curtains. The first sensation is the chill. Your bedroom is freezing. Unlike your toasty modern bed with its memory foam and down comforter, you're lying on a horsehair mattress that's lumpy in all the wrong places. The sheets are cold and slightly damp from the morning fog that seeps through London's poorly insulated windows. You reach one arm out from under your woolen blanket and immediately regret it. The air feels like ice water against your skin. Your breath forms little clouds in the frigid bedroom. No central heating here, just the dying embers of last night's fire barely glowing in the small fireplace across the room. "Miss Eleanor, are you awake, miss?" The door creaks open, and your lady's maid, Martha, enters with a pitcher of lukewarm water. She's already been up for hours, hauling that water up 3 flights of stairs. Your mother says today's the day, miss. The Chamberlain dinner party is tonight. And just like that, your stomach drops. Today is indeed the day. Your official introduction to London society. The first dinner party of many during your first season. The formal beginning of the Victorian marriage market. "Martha," you whisper, "I think I'm going to be sick." Now, miss. Every young lady feels that way. But your mama says you're ready, and ready you'll be. You're not sure if you want to cry or scream. Unlike your comfortable modern dating life where you might swipe right or meet someone at school, Victorian dating is basically a full contact sport with your reputation on the line. "Can you imagine?" Martha says as she pours the water into your wash basin. "Mr. Thornfield might be there tonight, the one your mamma says has 2,000 a year." She gives you a knowing look. See, that's the thing about Victorian courtship. It's never just about finding someone you like. It's about finding someone with the right income, the right family, the right everything. And everyone, absolutely everyone, will be watching your every move. Your mother has spent the past 3 years preparing you for this moment. Lessons in proper conversation, never too witty, never too dull. How to sit, stand, and walk. How to use cutlery in the correct order during a 12-course meal. How to dance without looking like you're enjoying it too much. How to show just enough ankle to be intriguing but not so much you'd be considered fast. The survival stakes are real. One wrong move, one misplaced word, one improper glance, and your entire future could crumble. Your family's reputation along with it. Come now, miss. Let's get you washed. Martha helps you out of bed, and the full weight of Victorian morning rituals begins. First, there's the washing with barely warm water in a small basin. Just your face and hands, mind you. Victorians weren't big on daily full-body bathing. You'd get a proper bath maybe once a week. I know your modern nose is wrinkling at the thought, but that was considered perfectly hygienic. Your mother wants you in the blue dress tonight, Martha says, laying out your undergarments. Says it brings out your eyes. In your head you're screaming, "The blue one? With the whaleboned bodice that makes it impossible to breathe?" But outwardly you just nod. Survival in Victorian society means accepting physical discomfort as your constant companion. Breakfast is a quiet affair. Your father hides behind his newspaper while your mother quizzes you on the names of every eligible bachelor likely to attend tonight's dinner. Now remember, Eleanor, the Chamberlain's second son is in trade, so don't encourage him, but their eldest has prospects, and the Darlington boy might be there. Poor conversation, but excellent family connections. Oh, and if Mr. Thornfield attends, mind you don't appear too eager. You take a small bite of toast, not tasting it. Your stomach is in knots. Unlike modern dating, where you might text someone, "Hey, wanna grab coffee?" Victorian courtship is an elaborate chess game where you're not allowed to touch the pieces directly. Everything must be done through proper channels, at the right time, with the right witnesses. And Eleanor, your mother adds, lowering her voice, remember that a lady never initiates conversation with the gentleman unless properly introduced, and never, ever remain alone with a gentleman even for a moment. Yes, mother, you say automatically. So, what? People just never got to be alone together, you're probably wondering. Honestly, that's kind of the point. Victorian courtship was designed to prevent exactly what most modern dating is about, getting to know someone one-on-one. Instead, you'd meet potential partners in strictly controlled environments with family members hovering like well-dressed vultures. The morning drags into afternoon and suddenly it's time to prepare for the dinner party. This isn't a quick shower and outfit change. Oh no, this is a 4-hour production. Martha draws you a lukewarm bath scented with rose water. You soak just long enough to take the London chill from your bones. Then begins the elaborate process of dressing. First, the chemise, a simple cotton shift that's the only barrier between your skin and everything else. Then cotton drawers with an open seam. Yes, Victorian underwear had a completely open crotch. Makes using the chamber pot easier when you're wearing 17 layers. Next comes the corset. Hold up. Let me paint you a picture of this torture device. A Victorian corset isn't that cute little lace-up thing you see in lingerie stores. It's a heavy, steel-boned contraption designed to force your body into the fashionable silhouette. Tiny waist, pushed-up bosom, straight posture. Deep breath in. Miss, Martha warns before pulling the laces. You inhale as much as you can, gripping the bedpost for support. Martha pulls. The corset tightens like a boa constrictor, squeezing your ribs until they feel like they're touching your spine. Your lungs can only fill halfway now. Your lower ribs might actually bruise. Again, miss, we need to get you down another inch for the blue dress. Another pull, another notch tighter. By the time Martha's satisfied, you can only take shallow breaths from the very top of your lungs. Your waist is now unnaturally tiny, your posture forcibly erect. This is how you'll spend the next 8 hours. Makes swiping on apps while lying on your couch in pajamas seem pretty appealing, right? But we're nowhere near done. Over the corset goes the crinoline, a cage-like structure made of steel hoops that will make your skirt bell out in that classic Victorian silhouette. It bounces as you walk, knocking against furniture and making it nearly impossible to pass through doorways without turning sideways. "Hold still, miss," Martha mutters, sliding petticoat after petticoat over the crinoline. Each layer adds weight. By the time she fastens the actual dress, the blue silk with its tight bodice and voluminous skirt, you're carrying an extra 15 pounds of fabric. Now for your hair. Martha sits you at the vanity and begins the painstaking process of arranging your locks. No quick ponytail here. Your hair is brushed, sectioned, curled with hot irons, pinned, and arranged in an elaborate style that shows both sophistication and maidenly modesty. The process takes nearly an hour. By the time you're deemed presentable, face lightly powdered, lips lightly rouged, but not too much or you'd be considered fast, hair arranged, dress fitted, gloves buttoned, small reticule prepared, you're exhausted, and the evening hasn't even begun. You look beautiful, Eleanor, your mother says when you descend the stairs. There's genuine pride in her voice, and for a moment you feel a flash of warmth. This is what she's prepared you for your entire life. Your father looks up from his pocket watch and smiles. "My girl's all grown up," he says, and you detect a hint of sadness. Once you enter society, once you find a match, you'll leave his protection for your husband's. That's the Victorian way. The carriage ride to the Chamberlain's home is silent, filled with nervous anticipation. You stare out the window at London's gas-lit streets, wondering which of the men you'll meet tonight might eventually become your husband, because that's the end goal here. Not dating for fun, not seeing where things go, but marriage, preferably by the end of the season. The Chamberlain's townhouse is ablaze with light when you arrive. Footmen in livery stand at attention as carriages deposit finely dressed guests at the entrance. Your father hands you down from the carriage, careful not to wrinkle your dress. "Remember, chin up," your mother whispers as you approach the door. "And for heaven's sake, don't talk about those books you're always reading. Men don't want a blue stocking." You take a deep breath, as deep as your corset allows, and enter the lion's den. The Chamberlain's drawing room is crowded with London's finest society. The air is thick with perfume, cologne, and the subtle scent of money. Crystal chandeliers throw dancing light across silk gowns and jewelled hair ornaments. The gentle murmur of proper conversation is punctuated by occasional polite laughter, and everyone, absolutely everyone, is watching everyone else. Miss Hartwell, Mrs. Chamberlain greets you at the door. How delightful you could come. The complicated dance begins immediately. Your mother expertly maneuvers you through the crowd, making strategic introductions. You curtsy, smile, speak when spoken to, laugh softly at appropriate jokes, all while scanning the room for potential suitors through lowered lashes. Direct eye contact? Absolutely not. That would be considered forward. "Miss Hartwell, may I present Mr. James Thornfield?" Your host introduces a tall, dark-haired gentleman who looks to be in his late 20s. This is the man your mother mentioned. £2,000 a year and excellent family connections. You curtsy. He bows. "A pleasure." "Miss Hartwell," he says, his voice pleasantly deep. "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Thornfield," you respond, the practised words falling from your lips automatically. And that's it. That's the extent of your first interaction with a potential life partner. He moves on to the next introduction, and you're swept away to meet the next gentleman. This isn't like modern dating, where you might have a deep, hours-long conversation on your first meeting. Victorian introductions were brief, formal and thoroughly supervised. You'd form your initial impression, and if interested, the gentleman would follow up by calling at your home, with your parents present, of course. Dinner is announced, and here comes another test. The seating arrangement is strictly determined by social rank. You're relieved when your host's son is assigned to escort you in, meaning you rank somewhere in the middle of the gathering. Not embarrassingly low, but not presumptively high either. The dining room takes your breath away, what little breath your corset allows. The table gleams with silver, crystal, and fine china. Multiple forks, spoons, and knives sit at each place setting, a minefield of potential etiquette disasters. You're seated between your escort and an older gentleman who, thankfully, seems content to focus on his food rather than conversation. Across from you sits Mr. Thornfield, who occasionally glances your way. In your head you're screaming, "This is how I die," by accidentally using the fish fork for meat or drinking from someone else's water glass. The first course arrives, clear soup. You carefully take your soup spoon, the correct one, thank God, and delicately sip from the side of the spoon, never the tip. One etiquette hurdle cleared, only 11 more courses to go. "Do you enjoy music, Miss Hartwell?" Mr. Thornfield asks suddenly from across the table. Every eye in the vicinity turns to you. This is a test. Say you love music too enthusiastically, and you might appear overeager. Dismiss it, and you seem uncultured. "I appreciate fine music, Mr. Thornfield," you respond carefully, "though I play only moderately well myself." He nods, seeming pleased with your answer. "Perhaps you might play for us after dinner." Your stomach sinks. Playing for a room of critical strangers is another Victorian courtship ritual you've been dreading, but refusal isn't an option. "If Mrs. Chamberlain wishes it, I would be honoured," you reply. Your mother, seated 4 places away, gives you an approving nod. You've navigated that exchange correctly. The meal progresses through course after elaborate course. Soup is followed by fish, then meat, then game, with palate cleansers and side dishes interspersed. Wine flows freely for the gentlemen, while ladies take only small sips. Becoming intoxicated would be a social disaster of the highest order. You're hyper-aware of every movement. Back straight, not that the corset gives you much choice. Elbows off the table, small bites, minimal chewing, no slurping, no reaching. Wait for each dish to be offered to you. Accept a little of everything, even if you dislike it. Never finish everything on your plate. That would suggest hunger or greed. Both unladylike. It's exhausting. Unlike your casual dinner date at a restaurant where you might order whatever you want and actually enjoy eating it, this Victorian dinner is an elaborate performance where food is merely a prop. By the 10th course, you're light-headed from the corset and the stress. But the night is far from over. After dinner, the ladies withdraw to the drawing room while the gentlemen remain for port and cigars. "You did well with Mr. Thornfield," your mother whispers as you sip tea in the drawing room. "He watched you throughout dinner." You feel a flutter of something. Not quite excitement, not quite dread. Mr. Thornfield seemed pleasant enough, more interesting than the other gentlemen you've met. But is that enough to build a life upon? When the gentlemen rejoin the ladies half an hour later, Mrs. Chamberlain does indeed ask you to play the pianoforte. This is a standard Victorian courtship showcase, a chance to display your accomplishments while looking decorative. You sit at the instrument, arranging your skirts carefully, and begin to play a simple but pleasing melody. You're not particularly talented, but you've practiced enough to be competent. As you play, you're acutely aware of Mr. Thornfield standing nearby, turning pages for you. You play with feeling, Miss Hartwell, he says quietly when you finish. That's more important than technical perfection, I think. You glance up, surprised by his comment. That's not the standard compliment. You're kind to say so, Mr. Thornfield, you respond, careful not to show too much pleasure at his words. Not kind, he corrects gently, merely honest. Do you enjoy reading as well as music? Your mother's warning echoes in your mind, but something in his expression makes you answer truthfully. Yes, very much. His eyes light up with genuine interest. Then we must discuss books sometime, perhaps when I call on your family. And there it is, the first step in the Victorian courtship process. A gentleman asking permission to call on you at home. Your heart races, but outwardly you maintain perfect composure. My parents welcome visitors on Tuesday afternoons, you say, the formal response coming automatically. He smiles, bows slightly, and moves away. The entire exchange took less than 2 minutes, but it's enough to set the courtship wheels in motion. By midnight, you're back home, exhausted but unable to sleep as Martha helps unlace your corset. The relief is immediate and almost painful as blood rushes back to compressed areas. "Well, miss, how was it?" Martha asks, helping you into your nightgown. You think about the evening, the stress, the discomfort, the constant awareness of being watched and judged. But then you remember Mr. Thornfield's comment about reading, the genuine interest in his eyes. It was, you search for the right word, a beginning. As you slide between the cold sheets of your bed, you realize that Victorian courtship is a marathon, not a sprint. Tonight was just the first of many carefully orchestrated social encounters that might eventually lead to marriage. You drift off to sleep wondering what Mr. Thornfield likes to read, and whether Tuesday is too far away. And as for you, lying in your comfortable modern bed with no corset in sight, be grateful that your dating disasters involve awkward text messages rather than social ruin. The Victorians somehow found love despite the rules, or perhaps because of them. The anticipation, the careful dance of approach and retreat, the thrill of a meaningful glance across a crowded room. There was magic there, even among the constraints. Sleep well, dreaming of a time when a turned fan or a carefully placed flower could speak volumes more than any dating profile ever could. Tuesday couldn't come fast enough. Eleanor spent the 3 days after the Chamberlain dinner in a state of nervous anticipation. Would Mr. Thornfield actually call? Had she imagined the interest in his eyes? Was her blue dress too forward? Not forward enough? The waiting game was a cornerstone of Victorian courtship, a far cry from today's instant text messages and dating apps. No, "Hey, I had fun last night" messages. No checking if he was active on social media. Just silence and endless speculation. "Your posture, Eleanor," Mother reminded her at breakfast Monday morning. A gentleman notices how a lady carries herself. Eleanor straightened her already straight spine, pushing her shoulders back. Even at home, the physical constraints of Victorian womanhood never relaxed. Your breath catches imagining being constantly aware of your posture, your facial expressions, your every movement being scrutinized. Not just on dates, all the time. "Now, I've instructed Mrs. Wilson to prepare the good tea service tomorrow," her mother continued, spreading a thin layer of marmalade on her toast. "And we'll have those small almond cakes. Nothing too elaborate. We don't want to appear as though we're trying to impress. The irony, of course, was that everything about Victorian courtship was designed to impress, while simultaneously pretending not to care. It was exhausting. Of course, Mr. Thornfield may not be the only caller, her mother added with calculated casualness. The Darlington boy seemed quite taken with you. Eleanor suppressed a grimace. Mr. Braid. Darlington had indeed stared at her throughout dinner, but had spoken exactly 3 words to her. Charmed, Miss Hartwell. Not exactly the foundation for lasting affection. Mother, Eleanor ventured carefully, do you think it proper to discuss books with Mr. Thornfield if he calls? He expressed an interest in literature. Her mother's eyes narrowed slightly. A passing comment, I'm sure. Gentlemen prefer to lead the conversation, Eleanor. A few modest opinions are acceptable, but remember, men don't marry women who challenge them intellectually. That night, lying in her bed, Eleanor stared at the ceiling and whispered to herself, what if I want someone who welcomes a challenge? In your cosy modern bed, you're probably thinking, just be yourself, girl. But in Victorian England, being yourself was rarely an option, if yourself didn't conform to very specific standards. Tuesday morning dawned bright and clear, a rarity in London. Eleanor was up before Martha arrived, too nervous to sleep. The formal at-home hours for morning calls were between 3 and 5 in the afternoon, but preparation began much earlier. The house was in an uproar. Maids polished silver tea services, dusted ornaments, and arranged fresh flowers in the drawing room. The cook prepared delicate cakes and biscuits. Even Eleanor's father was banished to his club for the afternoon. Morning calls were strictly women's affairs. Your Green Day dress, I think, her mother decided after breakfast, with the modest lace collar, fashionable but not too showy. Martha helped Eleanor dress with particular care. The green dress was mercifully lighter than her dinner gown, though still layered over a corset and petticoats. Her hair was arranged simply but elegantly, with a few loose curls framing her face, the Victorian version of I woke up like this. You look lovely, miss, Martha said, stepping back to admire her work. Not too eager, but pretty enough to catch any gentleman's eye. That was the perpetual balance, being attractive without seeming to try, interested without being forward, accomplished without being threatening. Modern dating has its complications, but at least you can text, I had fun last night without risking social ruin. By 2 o'clock, Eleanor sat in the drawing room with her mother, ostensibly working on embroidery while her stomach twisted with nerves. The embroidery hoop provided something to do with her hands, but more importantly, it was an acceptable activity that could be quickly set aside when visitors arrived. Remember to keep conversation light, her mother reminded her for the 10th time. The weather, music, perhaps art if the gentleman seems cultured. Nothing controversial. Yes, mother, Eleanor replied automatically, pricking her finger with the needle. A drop of blood welled up, and she quickly pressed her handkerchief to it. Blood on her embroidery would be noticed and remarked upon, possibly interpreted as carelessness, a quality no Victorian husband wanted in a wife. The clock ticked loudly in the silent room. 3 o'clock came and went, no visitors. It's early yet, her mother said, her own needle moving steadily through the fabric. Quality callers often come later in the afternoon. 3:15. 3:30. Nothing. Eleanor's hopes began to sink. She'd misinterpreted Mr. Thornfield's interest. Or worse, her mother was right. No man wanted a woman who admitted to enjoying books. Then, at precisely 3:45, the doorbell rang. Both women froze, exchanged glances, then deliberately returned to their embroidery. Appearing eager was the cardinal sin of Victorian courtship. A lady never rushed to the door, never showed excitement at a caller's arrival. That was what servants were for. Their butler, Harrison, appeared at the drawing-room door moments later bearing a small silver tray with a calling card. "Mr. James Thornfield," he announced solemnly. Eleanor's mother nodded regally. "We will receive him." "Now hold up. Let me explain how big a deal this little calling card was. In Victorian society, these small rectangles of cardstock were serious business. Basically, the original social network. A gentleman's card was rectangular and simple, with just his name, while a lady's was larger and more ornate. When Mr. Thornfield handed his card to Harrison, he was formally requesting permission to enter their home. Had Eleanor's mother been unimpressed by him, or thought him unsuitable, she could have instructed Harrison to say they were not at home, the polite fiction used to refuse callers without outright rejection. But she had accepted, the first small victory in the courtship dance. Harrison returned moments later with Mr. Thornfield, who stood formally in the doorway until invited further. Miss Hartwell, he said, bowing slightly. "I hope I find you well." "Quite well, thank you, Mr. Thornfield," Eleanor's mother replied. "Please do sit down." He sat in the chair indicated, opposite the sofa where Eleanor and her mother were seated, close enough for conversation, but at a properly respectable distance. Every physical position in the Victorian drawing-room was calculated for propriety. "We are so pleased you could call," her mother continued, setting aside her embroidery. "Eleanor, dear, perhaps you might pour the tea." This was no small request. Pouring tea correctly was another test of a young lady's graces. Eleanor moved to the tea table, grateful that her hands weren't visibly shaking as she lifted the heavy silver teapot. "How do you take your tea, Mr. Thornfield?" she asked, proud of her steady voice. "Just a touch of milk, no sugar, thank you," he replied, watching her hands as she prepared the cup. The ritual of tea serving was elaborate and meaningful. As Eleanor handed him the cup, making sure their fingers didn't touch, as that would be scandalously forward, she noticed him studying her face with quiet interest. "I trust you've been enjoying the fine weather, Mr. Thornfield?" her mother asked, launching into the mandatory discussion of meteorological conditions that began all proper Victorian conversations. "Indeed, Mrs. Hartwell, though I've been too occupied with business matters to fully appreciate it," he replied politely. For the next 15 minutes, Eleanor sat in near silence as her mother and Mr. Thornfield exchanged pleasantries about the weather, mutual acquaintances, and the previous night's concert at St. James's Hall. This was standard procedure. The first part of any call was directed by the senior lady present. Finally, her mother turned to Eleanor. "My daughter was quite impressed by the Chamberlain's musical selections the other evening, weren't you, Eleanor?" This was her cue to enter the conversation, carefully, modestly, and without appearing too eager. "The Mozart was particularly well chosen," Eleanor offered. "Mr. Sect." Thornfield's expression brightened. "Do you enjoy Mozart, Miss Hartwell?" "I find his compositions most pleasing," she replied, the bland statement masking her genuine enthusiasm for music. "As do I, though I confess a preference for Beethoven's Passion," he said, then glanced at Mrs. Hartwell as if checking whether such a statement was acceptable. Eleanor's mother nodded slightly, granting permission for the conversation to continue in this vein. "And what of literature, Miss Hartwell?" Mr. Thornfield asked, returning to the topic he'd broached at the dinner party. "Have you read anything of note recently?" Eleanor hesitated, her mother's warning echoing in her mind. But something in Mr. Thornfield's expression, an earnestness, a genuine curiosity, emboldened her. "I recently finished The Mill on the Floss," she admitted, "though perhaps I shouldn't confess to reading such modern novels. In your head, you're thinking, George Eliot? That's her big scandalous reading." But in 1862, reading contemporary novels, especially those dealing with complex moral questions, wasn't considered entirely proper for young ladies. They were supposed to stick to improving religious texts and perhaps a bit of Jane Austen. "George Eliot has a remarkable insight into human nature," Mr. Thornfield replied, his eyes lighting up, "though I found the ending rather tragic. Do you prefer happier conclusions, Miss Hartwell?" Before Eleanor could answer, her mother interjected smoothly. "My daughter has always had a fondness for poetry. Perhaps you might recommend some suitable volumes, Mr. Thornfield. Something appropriately uplifting." And just like that, the conversation was steered back to safer waters. Eleanor shot Mr. Thornfield an apologetic glance, which he acknowledged with a slight smile. The remainder of the visit, precisely half an hour, the acceptable duration for a first call, passed in pleasant but controlled conversation. As it concluded, Mr. Thornfield stood and bowed. "Mrs. Hartwell, Miss Hartwell, thank you for your hospitality. Might I have the pleasure of calling again next week?" "We are at home on Tuesdays and Thursdays," her mother replied, the standard formula neither directly accepting nor rejecting his request. After he departed, Eleanor's mother turned to her with a satisfied expression. "Well, that was most promising. He is clearly interested, and his manners are impeccable, though I would caution against appearing too learned, Eleanor. A gentleman appreciates refinement, not blue-stocking tendencies." Eleanor nodded obediently, but internally she was replaying the moment when Mr. Thornfield's eyes had lit up at the mention of George Eliot. Perhaps not all gentlemen wanted mindless companions after all. The following day brought more calling cards. Word had spread through London society that Eleanor Hartwell had made a favourable impression at the Chamberlain dinner. 3 different gentlemen left their cards while she and her mother were out paying their own calls. Because yes, that's another aspect of Victorian social life. Women also made calls on other women, usually returning visits from those who had called on them first. It was a never-ending cycle of social obligation, with strict rules about who called on whom, how long to stay, and how soon to return visits. "Mr. Darlington, Mr. Peters, and Mr. Sullivan," her mother read from the cards when they returned home. "All from good families. The season is going well for you, Eleanor." The following week brought more social engagements. Another dinner party, a musical evening, an afternoon garden party where Eleanor caught sight of Mr. Thornfield from across the lawn, but only managed to exchange a brief greeting. That's how Victorian courtship often progressed, in glimpses and moments, building anticipation through carefully orchestrated near misses. "Miss Hartwell," he said when they were briefly thrown together at the refreshment table, "I've been reading Tennyson's latest. I thought of your interest in poetry." "Have you found it enjoyable?" she asked, aware of at least 3 matrons watching their interaction with hawkish interest. "Immensely. Perhaps we might discuss it when I call tomorrow." "I look forward to it," she replied, then was immediately whisked away by her mother to meet an elderly countess. These tiny exchanges, These moments of connection, they were the building blocks of Victorian romance. No long, intimate conversations, no casual coffee dates, no private text messages, just public glimpses that slowly, gradually built interest and affection. When Tuesday came again, Eleanor found herself genuinely looking forward to Mr. Thornfield's call. This time she chose her own dress, a blue-green that complemented her eyes better than the plain green her mother had selected the week before. "That's rather bright for morning calls," her mother commented. "It's my favourite colour," Eleanor replied simply. Her mother sighed. "Very well, but do try to keep the conversation more general today. Mr. Thornfield seemed altogether too interested in your opinions on literature." "As if that were a bad thing, you're thinking. And you're right. By modern standards, a man being interested in a woman's thoughts is the bare minimum. But in Victorian society, it was somewhat unusual, even potentially threatening to the established order." When Mr. Thornfield arrived, precisely at the same time as his previous visit, Eleanor noted with pleasure that he was carrying a small wrapped package. After the initial greetings and tea-pouring ritual, he said, "Mrs. Hartwell, I hope you'll forgive the liberty, but I've brought a volume of poetry I thought Miss Hartwell might enjoy." He presented the package to Eleanor's mother, not to Eleanor directly. Proper Victorian etiquette demanded that gifts to unmarried women be approved by their mothers first. Her mother unwrapped it carefully, a slim volume of Tennyson's Enoch Arden and other poems recently published. "How thoughtful," she said, examining the book before passing it to Eleanor. "My daughter is fond of poetry, as I mentioned." Eleanor accepted the book, careful not to appear too eager. "Thank you, Mr. Thornfield. This is most kind. I've marked a few passages I found particularly moving," he said, "though I'd be interested in your opinion on the entire work." He was asking for her thoughts, her genuine opinions. In the highly restricted world of Victorian courtship, this was practically a declaration. "I'll be sure to read it carefully," she promised. Their eyes met briefly, and in that moment something passed between them. Understanding, connection, possibility. Eleanor quickly looked away, conscious of her mother's watchful gaze. The rest of the visit proceeded much like the first, though this time Eleanor's mother allowed the conversation to linger on literature a bit longer before steering it toward the upcoming ball at Thornton House. "I believe you're acquainted with the Thorntons, Mr. Thornfield?" her mother inquired. "Indeed, Sir William and I share some business interests," he replied. "Their ball is always a highlight of the season." "Eleanor has just received her invitation," her mother said proudly. Being invited to the Thornton ball was a mark of social acceptance. "Perhaps you might request a dance, Mr. Thornfield?" This was forward, even for a mother, but Mrs. Hartwell clearly saw promising potential in Mr. Thornfield. "It would be my honour," he replied, glancing at Eleanor. "If Miss Hartwell would do me the kindness of saving me a space on her dance card." "I should be delighted," Eleanor said, the formal response belying the flutter in her chest. As Mr. Thornfield prepared to leave, having once again stayed exactly half an hour, he said, "Mrs. Hartwell, would you permit me to escort you and Miss Hartwell to the Phillips musical soiree on Friday evening? I understand it's to be a small gathering, and I believe we are all invited." This was a significant step forward in the courtship process. A gentleman offering to escort a young lady and her chaperone to an event indicated serious interest. Not quite a declaration, but certainly more than casual acquaintance. Her mother beamed. "How kind of you to offer, Mr. Thornfield. We would be most pleased to accept." After he left, her mother was practically glowing with satisfaction. "Well, Eleanor, it seems Mr. Thornfield is quite taken with you. An escort to the Phillips's soiree, a dance promised at the Thornton ball. These are not casual attentions." Eleanor ran her fingers over the cover of the poetry book. "He seems different from other gentlemen." "Different?" Her mother frowned slightly. "In what way?" "He appears genuinely interested in conversation," Eleanor said carefully. "In ideas?" Her mother looked thoughtful. "Well, he is somewhat older, perhaps nearly 30. More established men can afford to be a bit unconventional. But mind you don't encourage too much intellectual discussion, Eleanor. A gentleman may enjoy the novelty of a clever comment or two, but for marriage they want someone soothing and agreeable." That night, alone in her room, Eleanor lit an extra candle and opened the book Mr. Thornfield had given her. Several pages were marked with tiny pencil dots, easily erased, leaving no evidence for prying eyes. Smart man, she thought with a smile. The marked passages were beautiful. Lines about courage and conviction, about seeing beyond society's constraints. Was he sending her a message? Or was she reading too much into a simple gift? Eleanor fell asleep with the book beside her pillow, dreaming of conversations that might be possible beyond the restrictive confines of the drawing room. In a world where courtship proceeded at a glacial pace through rigidly controlled encounters, the simple gift of a book with marked passages felt almost scandalously intimate. As for you, drifting off in your modern bed, imagine a world where a shared literary reference was as thrilling as a first kiss, where the brush of gloved fingers during a teacup exchange sent hearts racing. Victorian courtship may have been ridiculously formal, but perhaps there's something to be said for the slow burn of carefully cultivated anticipation. In our next chapter, Eleanor will discover there's more to Victorian flirtation than just calling cards and chaperoned visits. The secret languages of fans, flowers, and gloves allowed couples to communicate under the very noses of their watchful chaperones. A Victorian workaround to all those rules we've been talking about. Sleep well, and maybe consider sending that person you're interested in a book instead of a text tomorrow. Some courtship traditions are worth reviving, even if we happily leave the corsets in the past. Friday evening arrived, and with it the Phillips musical soiree. For Eleanor it marked a significant milestone, her first public appearance with Mr. Thornfield as their escort. Not quite a declaration, but definitely a statement to society that he had a particular interest in the Hartwell family. "Remember, Eleanor," her mother coached as Martha arranged her hair, "it's acceptable to show some animation during musical performances, but never excessive emotion. A gentle smile, perhaps a slight swaying to the rhythm. Nothing more." The rules for public behaviour were exhaustingly specific. Each gesture, each expression was coded and meaningful. Unlike today, where you might text, "That was amazing," after a concert or post a video of yourself dancing, Victorians communicated their feeling through subtle, almost imperceptible signals. "And your fan," her mother continued, holding up the delicate ivory and lace accessory. "Use it judiciously." "Oh, the fan." That innocent-looking accessory was actually one of the most powerful communication tools in a Victorian woman's arsenal. In a society where direct speech was restricted, where couples were rarely alone, and where every word was monitored, The language of the fan offered a secret pathway to express feelings that could never be spoken aloud. "I've had quite enough of fan etiquette, Mother," Eleanor said, immediately regretting her sharp tone. Her mother raised an eyebrow. "Clearly not, if you're taking that tone. The fan is not merely for cooling oneself, Eleanor. It speaks volumes to those who understand its language." You're probably rolling your eyes in your cozy modern bed, thinking this sounds ridiculous. But imagine being watched constantly, your every word analysed. You'd develop secret codes too. "Now," her mother demonstrated, opening the fan fully and fanning slowly. "This indicates you're engaged but available for conversation. Fanning quickly suggests agitation, to be avoided unless deliberately signalling distress. Closing the fan and tapping your palm means, 'I wish to speak with you.'" Eleanor sighed inwardly. She'd been drilled in fan language since she was 15, but her mother never tired of refreshing the lessons before important social events. "Drawing the fan across your cheek means 'I love you,'" her mother continued, "which you will absolutely not do under any circumstances. Mother, I hardly think the language of the fan is both powerful and dangerous, Eleanor. One wrong movement and your reputation could be compromised. Remember Lady Ainsworth's daughter last season? One careless fan gesture, interpreted by society as a declaration, and she was forced to marry a man she scarcely knew. That shut Eleanor up. Victorian courtship wasn't just about finding love. It was about survival in a society where women had few options and reputation was everything. When Mr. Thornfield arrived to escort them, Eleanor noted with interest that he carried a bouquet, not large or ostentatious, but a small, carefully arranged collection of flowers tied with a simple ribbon. "Mrs. Hartwell, Miss Hartwell," he greeted them with a bow. "You both look lovely this evening. I took the liberty of bringing these." He presented the bouquet to Eleanor's mother. Again, proper etiquette dictated gifts go through the chaperone first. Her mother examined the bouquet with a knowing eye. "How thoughtful, Mr. Thornfield. Quite a charming selection." She handed the flowers to Eleanor, who received them with carefully modulated pleasure. Not too eager, not too indifferent. "Thank you, Mr. Thornfield," she said. "They're beautiful." And they were. A tasteful arrangement of white roses, forget-me-nots, and lily of the valley, with a sprig of myrtle tucked almost invisibly among the blooms. To the casual observer, simply a pretty bouquet. But to anyone versed in floriography, the language of flowers, the message was clear. White roses for innocence and charm, forget-me-nots for true love and remembrance, lily of the valley for sweetness and the return of happiness, and myrtle, the most telling inclusion, for love and marriage. Eleanor's cheeks warmed slightly as she recognized the message. Mr. Thornfield was no amateur at the courtship game. He was telling her, in the most proper yet unmistakable way, that his intentions were serious. "I shall put these in water before we depart," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. "Allow me, Miss Eleanor," Martha said, taking the bouquet. She gave Eleanor a significant look. Martha, like most ladies' maids, was well versed in floral symbolism. Nothing escaped her notice. "Shall we?" Mr. Thornfield offered his arm to Mrs. Hartwell, as was proper. Eleanor would follow slightly behind, maintaining the appearance that it was her mother he was primarily escorting. The Phillips home was already crowded when they arrived. Musical soirees were smaller than balls, but still significant social events. with perhaps 40 or 50 guests instead of hundreds. A string quartet played in one corner of the drawing room, while clusters of people conversed in hushed tones. Mrs. Hartwell, Miss Hartwell, Mr. Thornfield, Mrs. Phillips greeted them warmly. "How delightful you could come. We're just about to begin the first performance." They were shown to seats near the centre of the room, a mark of status. Eleanor sat beside her mother, with Mr. Thornfield on her mother's other side. Even here they would not sit directly next to each other. As the first performer, a young lady with a passable soprano voice began to sing, Eleanor felt a strange prickling sensation. She was being watched. Glancing discreetly around the room, she caught the eye of Mr. Darlington, who had called at their home twice now. He nodded slightly, his gaze intense. Eleanor returned her attention to the singer, uncomfortable with Mr. Darlington's scrutiny. When the song ended, she applauded politely, then opened her fan, the signal that she was engaged but open to conversation. During the brief intermission between performances, Mr. Thornfield made his way to their seats. "Miss Hartwell, are you enjoying the music?" he asked, standing at a proper distance. "Very much," she replied. "Miss Thompson has a lovely voice." "Indeed," he paused. "I see you brought your fan this evening." Eleanor's heart quickened. Was he acknowledging that he understood fan language? "It can be rather warm in crowded rooms," she said carefully. "Indeed it can," he agreed, a hint of a smile playing at his lips. One must have ways to remain comfortable while still observing proprieties. Before she could respond, Mr. Darlington approached, inserting himself into their conversation, with barely a nod to Mr. Thornfield. "Miss Hartwell, how charming you look this evening," he said, standing slightly too close. "That shade of blue is most becoming." "Thank you, Mr. Sutt." "Darlington," Eleanor replied, instinctively closing her fan partially, the signal that she wished to speak to him, but not alone. Mr. Darlington either didn't know fan language or chose to ignore it. "I had hoped to see you at Lady Russell's garden party yesterday." "We had a prior engagement," Eleanor said, glancing at her mother for rescue. Mrs. Hartwell was deep in conversation with an elderly matron, and didn't notice her daughter's predicament. Mr. Thornfield, however, did. "I believe the next performance is about to begin," he said smoothly. "Miss Hartwell, might I escort you to your seat?" "Thank you, Mr. Thornfield," Eleanor said gratefully, accepting his arm in one of the few instances where a physical connection was permitted, the brief escort back to a seat in a crowded room. As they moved through the crowd, Eleanor felt Mr. Thornfield slip something into her hand, a small folded note. Her breath caught. Passing notes was scandalously forward, potentially ruinous if observed. She discreetly tucked it into her glove, heart pounding. The Victorian glove was another tool of secret communication. Messages could be hidden within them, and the way one wore or adjusted gloves sent signals. Dropping a glove was an invitation to a man to pick it up, and thereby publicly declare his interest. Once seated again beside her mother, Eleanor waited through the entire next performance, an interminable pianoforte piece that seemed to have no end, before she could risk reading the note. During the enthusiastic applause that followed, she pretended to adjust her glove and unfolded the tiny paper. In a neat, masculine hand were written 4 words: "Library, after next song." Eleanor nearly gasped aloud. He was suggesting they meet privately, a shocking breach of propriety that could ruin her reputation if discovered. Yet the thrill that coursed through her veins was undeniable. She glanced at Mr. Thornfield, who was watching her from across the room. He raised an eyebrow slightly, a question. In response, she touched her closed fan to her right cheek, the signal for yes. For the next 15 minutes, Eleanor could barely focus on the music. Her mind raced with both excitement and trepidation. Meeting unchaperoned even briefly was dangerous. Yet she found herself counting the minutes until she could reasonably excuse herself. When the song ended, she leaned toward her mother. "I need to visit the ladies' retiring room," she whispered. Her mother nodded absently, absorbed in the music. "Don't be long." Eleanor made her way out of the drawing room, heart hammering against her ribs. The Phillips Library was down the hall. She'd visited this house before and knew its layout. Glancing around to ensure no one was watching, she slipped inside the dimly lit room. Mr. Thornfield was already there, standing by the window. He turned as she entered, his expression a mixture of relief and concern. "Miss Hartwell," he said softly, "I feared you wouldn't come." "This is most improper," Eleanor whispered, staying near the door. "If we're discovered—" "I know," he interrupted. "Believe me, I wouldn't risk your reputation without good reason, but I needed to speak with you away from prying ears and watching eyes." Eleanor glanced nervously at the door. "We have perhaps 2 minutes before my absence is noted." Mr. Thornfield nodded, moving a step closer, still maintaining a respectable distance, but close enough that they could speak in hushed tones. "I wanted to be sure you understood the message in the flowers," he said. "Sometimes these symbols can be misinterpreted." "Oh, you're wondering if he's about to backtrack, aren't you? In your bed in 2025, you're probably thinking he's going to give some excuse, some 'it's not you, it's me' Victorian-style letdown." "The myrtle was perhaps too forward," he continued, "but I wanted to be clear about my intentions, Miss Hartwell. I find you quite unlike anyone I've met before." Eleanor's pulse quickened. "In what way?" "You have a mind of your own. You read George Eliot," he said with a small smile. "You're not merely parroting opinions you've been taught." "Many would consider that a fault in a woman," she said carefully. "I am not many," he replied simply. "I seek a partner, not an ornament." The word partner hung in the air between them, radical, almost revolutionary in a society where wives were legally considered property. "Mr. Thornfield, James," he said quietly. "My name is James." The use of his Christian name was another boundary crossed, intimate, personal. In public, they would remain Mr. Thornfield and Miss Hartwell until an engagement was announced. But here, in this stolen moment, they stepped beyond society's rigid formalities. "James," Eleanor said, testing the name on her lips. "I should return before I'm missed." He nodded. "Of course, but first—" He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object, pressing it into her hand. "For your fan." Eleanor glanced down. It was a small charm, the kind that could be attached decoratively to a fan's ribbon. A tiny silver book. The message couldn't be clearer. He valued her mind, her love of reading. "Thank you," she whispered, deeply moved by the thoughtful gesture. "We should return separately," he said, practical despite the emotion of the moment. "Wait 2 minutes after I leave." Eleanor nodded, tucking the charm into her glove alongside the note. More secrets to hide, more coded messages to cherish. After he left, she counted slowly to 120, composing herself before returning to the drawing room. Her mother gave her a questioning look as she took her seat. "You were gone quite a while," she observed. "There was a line," Eleanor lied smoothly. feeling a twinge of guilt. She'd never deceived her mother before, yet here she was, hiding notes and charms and secret meetings. But that was Victorian courtship, a dance between public propriety and private connection, between social rules and personal desires. The elaborate codes of fans and flowers and gloves existed precisely because the rules were so restrictive that couples needed alternative means of communication. The rest of the evening passed in a blur. Eleanor was hyper-aware of Mr. Thornfield's presence across the room, of the weight of the charm in her glove, of the secret they now shared. When he escorted them home, everything was perfectly proper. He handed Mrs. Hartwell down from the carriage, bowed formally at their door, thanked them for the pleasure of their company. Yet when he took Eleanor's hand to help her from the carriage, he pressed it slightly. Another silent message that meant everything to her and would be invisible to observers. "Until the Thornton ball," he said as he departed. "I believe you promised me a dance, Miss Hartwell." "Indeed I did, Mr. Thornfield," she replied, the formal words belying the warmth in her eyes. Once in her bedroom, with Martha helping her undress, Eleanor finally had a chance to examine the charm properly. It was exquisitely made, clearly expensive despite its small size. "That's a lovely trinket, miss," Martha commented, eyeing it curiously. "A gift?" "Yes," Eleanor admitted, seeing no point in hiding it from Martha, who knew all her secrets anyway. "From Mr. Thornfield." Martha smiled knowingly as she unlaced Eleanor's corset. "He seems a good sort, not like that Mr. Darlington who keeps calling. There's something not quite right about that one, if you don't mind my saying so." "I don't mind at all," Eleanor said, breathing deeply as the corset loosened. "I find Mr. Darlington rather intense." "Some might call it persistent," Martha observed, helping Eleanor into her nightgown. "Some might call it something else entirely." Eleanor sat at her vanity as Martha brushed out her hair. "What do you mean?" "Just that Mr. Darlington has been asking questions about you in the servants' hall when he calls. Wants to know your habits, your preferences. More than usual interest, if you take my meaning." This was concerning. The servants' network was an invisible but powerful force in Victorian society. Information flowed freely below stairs, and a gentleman pressing servants for details about a young lady was overstepping boundaries. "Thank you for telling me, Martha," Eleanor said thoughtfully. "I'll be careful round him." After Martha left, Eleanor examined her bouquet, now arranged in a vase on her nightstand. The flowers were beginning to droop slightly, their message fading with their freshness. But the charm, that was permanent, a token she could keep. She attached it to her fan's tassel, where it would be visible to those who knew to look for it. At the Thornton ball she would carry this fan, and Mr. Thornfield would see that she had accepted his gift, his message. As she drifted off to sleep, Eleanor reflected on the day's events. In the space of a few hours, her courtship with Mr. Thornfield had accelerated dramatically, from proper public interactions to secret notes and meaningful gifts. The rules of Victorian society still constrained them, but they had found ways to communicate beneath the surface, using the very tools designed to maintain propriety to express deeper feelings. You, tucked in your modern bed, might find it all absurdly complicated. Why not just say what you feel? Why the elaborate codes and signals? But perhaps there's something to be said for a society that valued restraint, that understood the power of subtlety. when every glance, every gesture carried weight. Nothing was casual, nothing thoughtless. In a world of instant messages and swipe-right dating, maybe we've lost something of that delicious anticipation, that careful consideration before expression. The Victorians may have taken it to extremes, but the principle remains. What's difficult to obtain is often more highly valued. Sleep well, dreaming of a time when a simple fan could speak volumes, when flowers carried messages, and when a chance to say someone's Christian name felt as intimate as a kiss does today. The Thornton Ball awaits in our next chapter, the highlight of Eleanor's season, where dances are promised, reputations are made and broken, and the language of the ballroom brings its own set of thrills and perils. Victorian courtship is about to move from the drawing room to the dance floor, where new rules and new opportunities await our couple. The week before the Thornton Ball was a flurry of preparation for Eleanor. This wasn't just any social event, it was the event of the early season, the one where reputations were cemented and courtships either flourished or withered under society's collective gaze. "Your dance card must be properly managed," her mother instructed over breakfast 3 days before the ball. "Accept no more than 2 dances from any gentleman, including Mr. Thornfield." Eleanor looked up from her toast. "Even though he's escorted us to the Phillips' soirée." "Especially because of that," her mother replied firmly. "Society is already noting his particular attention. To dance more than twice would suggest an understanding exists between you." That was Victorian code for "everyone will think you're practically engaged," which would be scandalous without a formal announcement. Unlike today, where you might post a relationship status update or introduce someone as your boyfriend after a few dates, Victorians moved at a glacial pace through carefully defined stages. "And what of Mr. Darlington? He's called 3 times now." Eleanor couldn't keep the reluctance from her voice. "His family connections are impeccable," her mother said pointedly. "You would do well to encourage him," Eleanor sighed. The marriage market aspect of Victorian courtship was inescapable. Mr. Segham. Darlington might make her uncomfortable, but his social standing made him a good prospect in her mother's eyes. The morning of the ball dawned with unexpected sunshine streaming through London's perpetual haze. Eleanor woke early, too nervous to sleep. Tonight would be different from dinner parties or musical evenings. Tonight she would dance with Mr. Thornfield, their bodies moving in choreographed patterns that, while rigidly proper, allowed for a closeness rare in Victorian society. "You're awake already, miss?" Martha asked, entering with the morning water. "Excited for tonight, are we?" "Anxious might be a better word," Eleanor admitted, sitting up in bed. Martha grinned. "Well, we've got your best gown ready. You'll outshine every girl there, if you don't mind my saying so." Preparations for a ball made dinner party. Preparations look casual in comparison. Eleanor spent the entire day getting ready, not because she was vain, but because Victorian beauty standards demanded it. First came the bath, this time with special French-milled soap scented with roses. Then a rigorous hair washing, a weekly event at most in Victorian times, followed by hours of drying by the fire. No hairdryers here, just patience and strategic placement near heat sources. Lunch was light, barely a few bites, because tonight's corset would be laced tighter than usual. By mid-afternoon, the serious preparations began. "Arms up," Martha instructed, lowering the corset around Eleanor's chemise-covered torso. The first pull of the laces made Eleanor gasp. Must it be so tight? Ball gowns are cut smaller than day dresses. Miss, Martha explained, pulling again, especially in the waist. By the sixth pull, Eleanor could only take shallow breaths from the very top of her lungs. Her waist was compressed to what modern eyes would consider an unhealthy, even dangerous degree. But in 1862, a tiny waist was the foundation of feminine beauty, worth a few crushed ribs and the occasional fainting spell. Now for the petticoats, Martha said, seemingly oblivious to Eleanor's discomfort. Layer after layer went over the corset and crinoline, each adding weight, each more elaborate than the last. The outermost petticoat was adorned with lace and ribbons, despite the fact that no one would see it. That was Victorian fashion for you. Beauty extended to the unseen layers. Finally, it was time for the ball gown itself. Eleanor had chosen a pale blue silk with delicate silver embroidery. The bodice was cut lower than her day dresses, though still modest by modern standards, with short sleeves that left her arms bare from just below the shoulder, one of the few instances where Victorian women could show some skin. "You look beautiful, miss," Martha said, stepping back to admire her work, like something from a fairy story. Eleanor turned to the mirror. The girl who stared back looked ethereal, almost otherworldly. Pale skin, fashionably so. Tiny waist, voluminous skirts that seemed to float around her. Her hair was arranged in elaborate curls with small silk flowers woven throughout. "The final touch," Martha said, presenting Eleanor with her fan, the one now bearing Mr. Thornfield's book charm. Eleanor took it, running her finger over the tiny silver book. "Thank you, Martha." "Now remember what your mother taught you," Martha said with a wink. "Fan language is powerful in a ballroom." When Eleanor descended the stairs, her parents were waiting in the entry hall. Her father looked up from his pocket watch and stared, momentarily speechless. "My dear," he said finally, "you're a vision." Her mother circled her appraisingly. "The neckline sits well. The waist could be tighter, but it will do. Remember your posture throughout the evening, Eleanor. No slouching even during the longest dances." As if slouching were possible in a corset this tight, Eleanor thought, but didn't say. Their carriage joined the line of vehicles approaching Thornton House. Gas lamps illuminated the grand entrance, where footmen in elaborate livery assisted ladies from their carriages. Music drifted from the open windows, along with the gentle murmur of polite conversation and the occasional burst of laughter. "Now remember," her mother whispered as they approached the receiving line, "your dance card should include a mix of established gentlemen and new acquaintances. Too many dances with familiar partners suggests limited appeal. Too many with strangers suggests improper eagerness." Eleanor nodded automatically. The rules were endless, contradictory, and exhausting. Imagine if modern dating apps came with 300-page instruction manuals on exactly how to swipe, when to message, and what photos to post, all with the threat of social ruin if you got it wrong. The Thornton ballroom took Eleanor's breath away, what little breath her corset allowed. Massive crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across polished floors. Hothouse flowers filled every corner, their heady scent mixing with perfume, cologne, and the subtle undertone of perspiration from dancers who had already completed several sets. Along one wall, chairs were arranged for chaperones and older ladies. The opposite wall featured long windows opening onto a terrace, offering blessed relief from the heat of the ballroom. A raised platform held the orchestra, at least 20 musicians in formal attire. Almost immediately, Eleanor was approached by a young man she recognised from the Chamberlain dinner. "Miss Hartwell," he bowed slightly, "might I request your name on my dance card for the first quadrille?" And so it began. The careful negotiation of the dance card, a small booklet attached to her wrist by a silk cord. Each dance of the evening was pre-printed on its pages, with space beside each for a gentleman's name. Filling this card was a delicate balance of strategy, obligation, and genuine preference. Eleanor accepted the young man's request, then navigated through the crowd with her mother, exchanging greetings and accepting more dance requests. Mr. Darlington found her almost immediately, securing the first waltz with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "You look enchanting tonight, Miss Hartwell," he said, standing slightly too close. "That shade of blue is celestial." "Thank you, Mr. Darlington," Eleanor replied, taking a small step back. "You're most kind." "I shall count the minutes until our dance," he said, his gaze intense enough to make her uncomfortable. Before she could respond, another voice interrupted. Mr. Buisette, Thornfield's. "Miss Hartwell, Mrs. Hartwell," he greeted them with a bow. "You both look radiant this evening." Eleanor's pulse quickened at the sight of him in formal evening attire. Black tailcoat, white waistcoat, pristine gloves. His cravat was tied in the most fashionable style, and his hair was neatly combed, though one lock rebelliously curled over his forehead. "Mr. Thornfield," her mother acknowledged. "How fortunate to encounter you early in the evening. Eleanor's card is filling rapidly." This was her mother's none too subtle way of telling him to stake his claim before all the dances were spoken for. "In that case," he said with a slight smile, "might I request the honour of the supper dance, Miss Hartwell? And perhaps the final waltz as well." The supper dance, the set immediately preceding the meal, was particularly significant. The gentleman who partnered a lady for this dance would escort her to supper afterward, allowing for actual conversation. And the final waltz was equally meaningful, a statement of serious interest. "I would be delighted," Eleanor replied, offering her dance card and pencil. As he wrote his name in the appropriate spaces, she noticed him glance at the charm on her fan. The corner of his mouth twitched upward slightly, a private acknowledgement of their secret. By the time the orchestra struck up the first quadrille, Eleanor's card was full, a relief and a triumph. An empty dance card was a public humiliation no young woman wanted to endure. Her first partner was perfectly polite but utterly forgettable, one of dozens of young men making the rounds of the season in search of a suitable wife. The steps of the quadrille were complex enough to prevent much conversation, which was probably for the best since he seemed to have nothing to say beyond comments about the weather. The second dance brought Mr. Darlington. From the moment he took her gloved hand, Eleanor felt tense. He held her slightly too close during the turns, his fingers pressing a fraction too firmly against her waist. "You dance divinely, Miss Hartwell," he murmured, his face uncomfortably near hers during a promenade. "Thank you," she replied, subtly increasing the distance between them. "The orchestra is exceptional tonight." "I've called at your home 3 times now," he continued, ignoring her attempt to redirect the conversation. "I was beginning to think you were avoiding me." Eleanor's chest tightened, and not just from the corset. His tone held an edge of accusation that was most improper. "My mother and I maintain a busy social calendar," she said carefully. "We're rarely at home these days." "Yet you seem to find time for Thornfield," he observed, his smile not reaching his eyes. She was saved from responding by the dance formation, which temporarily separated them. When they came together again, she deliberately kept the conversation to the most banal topics: the decorations, the guest list, the weather yet again. When the dance ended, he held her hand a moment longer than propriety dictated. "Until next time, Miss Hartwell." She curtsied briefly and retreated to her mother's side, subtly flexing her fingers to dispel the unpleasant sensation of his grip. "Mr. Darlington seems quite taken with you," her mother observed. "He seems intense," Eleanor replied cautiously. "Intensity can indicate passion," her mother said, "not an undesirable quality in a husband." Eleanor bit back a response. What did her mother know of passion? Her marriage to Eleanor's father had been arranged for financial security and social standing, the Victorian ideal of a sensible match. The evening progressed through country dances, another quadrille, and a lively polka. Eleanor's feet ached in her satin slippers, and her corset seemed to tighten with each passing hour. Yet the anticipation of the supper dance kept her spirits high. When the orchestra announced the set before supper, she found Mr. Thornfield waiting for her at the edge of the dance floor. "Miss Hartwell," he said, offering his arm, "I believe this dance is mine." It was a waltz, the most romantic and at one time scandalous of ballroom dances. Though fully accepted by the 1860s, it still carried a hint of daring, being one of the few dances where a couple remained in closed position throughout. As Mr. Thornfield's hand settled lightly at her waist and he took her gloved hand in his, Eleanor felt a flutter of excitement that had nothing to do with propriety, and everything to do with being close to him. They began to move with the music, turning in the prescribed circles around the floor. "You look beautiful tonight," he said quietly, his eyes meeting hers, "though I imagine you're counting the hours until you can remove that corset." Eleanor nearly missed a step in surprise. Gentlemen simply didn't acknowledge the existence of ladies' undergarments, even indirectly. "Mr. Thornfield," she gasped, half scandalized, half amused. "Forgive me," he said, though he didn't look particularly sorry. "I have sisters. I'm well aware of the tortures society inflicts on women in the name of fashion." "It's worth the discomfort," she replied, "for special occasions." "Is this a special occasion?" he asked, his tone light but his eyes serious. "I believe it might be," she admitted. They danced in silence for a moment, the music swelling around them. Despite the dozens of couples on the floor, the hundreds of eyes watching, Eleanor felt as though they were somehow alone, enclosed in a bubble of understanding. "I've been reading Tennyson," she said finally, "the volume you gave me." "And? What did you think of the passages I marked?" "I think," she said carefully, "that you have unconventional ideas about a woman's place in society." He smiled. "Is that a criticism or an observation?" "Neither, perhaps a hope." The dance ended too soon. As the final notes faded, Mr. Thornfield offered his arm to escort her to supper. This was the expected progression. The dance partner led his lady to the supper room, where they would share a meal and conversation. The supper room was arranged with small tables, allowing for semi-private conversations that would be impossible in the ballroom. Still, propriety was maintained. No couple sat completely alone, and chaperones circulated continuously. Mr. Thornfield secured a table in a relatively quiet corner and fetched a plate for Eleanor, another rare opportunity for him to demonstrate attentiveness. Victorian ladies never served themselves at public functions. "Thank you," she said. as he placed before her a modest selection of cold meats, fruit, and a small pastry. He sat across from her, not too close, but close enough for conversation without being overheard. "Have you been enjoying the ball, Miss Hartwell?" "Very much," she replied, "though I confess the continuous dancing is rather tiring." "Perhaps we might step onto the terrace after supper," he suggested, for a breath of fresh air. Eleanor hesitated. The terrace would be chaperoned, of course, but it offered more privacy than the ballroom or supper room. Going there with Mr. Thornfield would be a signal to society that she welcomed his particular attention. That would be lovely, she decided. Their supper conversation ranged from music to literature to the latest exhibit at the British Museum. Safer topics than personal feelings, but revealing in their own way. Eleanor found herself genuinely enjoying his company, not just tolerating it as a social necessity. "Shall we?" he asked when they had finished eating, offering his arm once more. The terrace was illuminated by paper lanterns, casting a soft glow over couples strolling along its length. Chaperones stationed at strategic intervals ensured nothing improper occurred, but the space between them allowed for moments of relative privacy. The night air was blessedly cool after the heat of the ballroom. Eleanor took a deep breath, as deep as her corset allowed, and felt some of the evening's tension leave her shoulders. "Better?" Mr. Thornfield asked, noting her relaxed expression. "Much," she admitted, "though I shouldn't complain. These evenings are what we prepare for, after all." "The artificial courtship rituals of polite society," he said with a hint of irony, "designed to ensure suitable matches while preventing any genuine understanding before marriage." Eleanor glanced at him, surprised by his frankness. "You sound critical of the system you're participating in, Mr. Thornfield." "James," he reminded her quietly, "when we can speak freely." "James," she repeated, the name still feeling intimate on her lips. "And yes, we are both playing by society's rules, aren't we?" "With some creative interpretations," he said, nodding toward her fan with its book charm. "I find the rules can be navigated by those willing to look beyond them." They had reached the far end of the terrace, partially concealed by a large potted palm, not truly private, but offering a moment of reduced scrutiny. "Eleanor," he said softly, using her given name for the first time, "I need to be clear about my intentions." Her heart raced. Was this it? The declaration that would move their courtship to the next formal stage? "I intend to call on your father next week," he continued, "to request his permission to court you officially." Not quite a proposal, but a significant step, the formal acknowledgement of his interest, moving their relationship from the realm of possibility to stated intention. "I would welcome that," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. He smiled, his relief evident. "I had hoped, but one can never be certain, especially when other gentlemen are showing such marked interest." "You mean Mr. Darlington?" Eleanor said. "Among others, though he seems particularly persistent." Eleanor hesitated, then decided to share her concerns. "He makes me uncomfortable. There's something improper about his attention." James frowned. "Has he been inappropriate?" "Nothing I can specifically identify," she admitted. "Just a feeling, and Martha mentioned he's been asking questions about me among the servants." "That is concerning," James said, his expression darkening. "Perhaps your father should be informed." "Perhaps," Eleanor agreed, "though I have no proof of anything beyond persistent attention." "I'll speak with your father regardless," James said, and make my intentions clear. That often discourages less serious suitors." The sound of the orchestra tuning up drifted from the ballroom, the signal that dancing would resume soon. "We should return," Eleanor said reluctantly. "My mother will be looking for me." "Of course." He offered his arm once more. "But I believe you promised me the final waltz as well." "I did indeed," she smiled, placing her hand on his arm. They rejoined the crowd in the ballroom just as the next set was forming. Eleanor's dance card called for a country dance with an elderly baronet, a courtesy inclusion suggested by her mother. As James escorted her to her partner, he squeezed her hand briefly. Another of those small private communications that meant everything. The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of music, movement, and meaningless conversation. Eleanor danced each dance dutifully, smiled at compliments, and answered polite inquiries. But her mind was fixed on the final waltz and on James's declaration of intent. When the orchestra announced the last dance of the evening, she found herself suddenly nervous. The final waltz was weighted with significance. Everyone would be watching. Everyone would understand that Mr. Thornfield had claimed this symbolic position. He appeared at her side as if conjured by her thoughts. "Miss Hartwell," he said formally, conscious of the eyes upon them, "may I have the honour?" "The pleasure is mine, Mr. Thornfield," she replied, equally formal. As they Civil War soldiers were more likely to die from diarrhea than from bullets. No, really. The disease killed 44,000 Union soldiers. That's the equivalent of 10 entire Gettysburg battles, and that was just one of the many diseases they faced. Hey, quick thing before we start. If you actually listen to these regularly, hit like or subscribe. I always wonder where everyone's at, so comment your city and what time it is. Weird to think some of you are having breakfast in London while I'm recording this at night here in the States. Alright, tonight it's the American Civil War, but before we go anywhere, get comfortable. Like, actually comfortable. Pillows good? Blanket situation handled? Perfect. Trust me on this one. Your eyes open to early morning light filtering through canvas. April 1863, Union Army, somewhere in Pennsylvania. First thing you notice is the straw poking through your thin blanket, jabbing into your back like tiny daggers. The wool blanket you're wrapped in scratches your skin and smells like wet dog mixed with sweat, not like your plush mattress at home. What pulls you fully awake is the sound, a bugle blaring reveille, hundreds of men coughing, someone nearby groaning with stomach cramps. That's becoming a familiar sound in camp, too familiar. Get up, Fletcher captain's coming through. You're Thomas Fletcher, 16 years old, though your enlistment papers say 18. You've been in the Union Army for exactly 3 weeks, and every morning you wake up wondering what the hell you were thinking. Back on your family's farm in western Pennsylvania, this time of morning meant feeding animals and helping Ma with breakfast. Now it means rushing to get dressed before the officers come through, trying to find clean water to wash your face, and praying your stomach doesn't betray you like it did yesterday. "I swear to God," says your tent mate Wilkins, a factory worker from Philadelphia, "if I have to dig another latrine today, I'm deserting." He doesn't mean it, not really, but the sentiment is there. The ground outside is mud. Not regular mud, this special kind of mud made by thousands of men living in close quarters with poor drainage. It's mixed with horse manure, human waste that didn't make it to the latrines, and whatever else has been discarded. And the smell? Jesus. I can't even describe it properly. It was bad. Like gag reflex bad. You'd probably need to breathe through your mouth. You know what's wild? 3 weeks ago, you were so excited to join. You'd heard Lincoln's call for volunteers, listened to the recruiter talk about glory and saving the Union, watched the town celebrate as you and 5 other boys signed up. Your ma cried, but your pa looked proud. Said you were doing what needed doing. Nobody told you about the mud, or the food, or the dysentery. Fletcher uniform inspection in 10 minutes. Get your ass moving. That's Sergeant Miller, former schoolteacher from Boston, seems to enjoy making your life miserable. You stumble out of your tent into the chaos of camp. 15,000 men all doing the same thing at once creates a special kind of madness. The camp stretches for miles, tents arranged in neat rows that somehow still look messy, campfires sending smoke into the morning air, men in various states of dress rushing about. Your stomach growls. Breakfast will be hardtack and salt pork, if you're lucky. Hardtack is basically a brick made of flour that could crack your teeth if you're not careful. Most guys soak it in coffee to soften it up. Problem is, sometimes that reveals the weevils living inside. Extra protein, the veterans joke. You're not laughing yet. Look alive, boys. It's Corporal Jenkins, looking way too chipper for this hour. Word is we're moving out tomorrow, heading south. The words send a jolt through you. South means closer to battle. You enlisted to fight, sure, but the reality of it is starting to sink in. They say Lee's army is on the move, Jenkins continues, lowering his voice like he's sharing state secrets. Could be the big one. William, the quiet farmer's son from Ohio who sleeps on your other side, looks up from lacing his boots. My pa says every battle is the big one until the next one comes along. Smart kid, William, barely older than you, but sometimes seems like he's carrying the wisdom of someone 3 times his age. His hands are permanently stained with dirt from the farm, much like yours. The morning routine is mind-numbing but necessary. Roll call, breakfast, drilling, more drilling, cleaning your rifle until you can see your reflection in the metal. You fired it exactly twice during training. Some of the boys had never held a gun before enlisting. "You seen Johnson this morning?" asks Wilkins, chewing on hardtack that makes an audible crunch with each bite. "Infirmary," says William quietly. "Fever got worse in the night." A moment of silence falls between you. 3 men from your company have already died of disease, and you haven't even seen battle yet. The infirmary tent is a place of nightmares, men moaning in pain, the smell of infected wounds and body odour, harried doctors moving from cot to cot with barely a glance at each patient. After breakfast, which is a generous way of describing what you just ate, it's drill time. 2 hours of marching back and forth across a muddy field, practicing formations that supposedly matter in battle. Forward march, right face, about face, load in 9 times, present arms. Your drill instructor is a weather-beaten man named Corporal Haynes who fought in the Mexican War. His voice carries across the field like thunder. "You call that a formation. My dead grandmother could make a straighter line again. The rifle is heavy. That's the thing nobody tells you. The Springfield model 1861 weighs about 10 pounds, which doesn't sound like much until you're holding it at shoulder arms for an hour. Your muscles burn. Sweat trickles down your back despite the cool spring air. But Haynes keeps pushing. When you meet Johnny Reb on the battlefield, you'll thank me. Loading your rifle needs to be instinct. You hesitate, you die. You try not to think about the dying part. Mid-morning brings a different kind of drill, bayonet practice, charging at straw dummies tied to posts, stabbing and slashing with a foot-long blade attached to your rifle. The thought of driving this into another human being makes your stomach turn, but you push the feeling down. This is what you signed up for. "Put your weight into it, Fletcher," Haynes barks. "They won't just stand there and let you poke 'em." By noon, your uniform is soaked through with sweat and your hands are blistered. There's a brief respite for a meal that's nearly identical to breakfast, and then it's equipment inspection. The sergeant walks down the line, examining each soldier's kit: rifle, bayonet, cartridge box, cat pouch, haversack, canteen, blanket, roll. Everything must be in place, clean as possible given the circumstances. "Your rifle's filthy, Thompson," he says to the man next to you. "Clean it again." When he reaches you, he pauses. "Boots coming apart, Fletcher. See the quartermaster after this." You glance down. Sure enough, the sole of your right boot is separating from the upper. Great. The quartermaster is notoriously stingy with new equipment. "Stitch it together," he'll probably say. "We're not made of boots." After inspection comes fatigue duty, the Army's term for chores. Today, your squad is assigned to dig new latrines. The old ones are filling up fast and the smell is becoming unbearable even by camp standards. So you spend 2 hours digging trenches in the hard ground, taking turns with worn shovels. "You know what my father told me before I left," says Wilkins, pausing to wipe sweat from his brow. "He said, 'Son, in the army you'll see the best and worst of men.' He didn't mention I'd be smelling the worst too." That gets a laugh from the group. Humour, however crude, is your collective shield against the reality of your situation. By late afternoon, your hands are raw and your back aches, but the new latrines are dug. You head to the creek that runs along the edge of camp to wash up. The water is cold and not particularly clean, too many men using it upstream, but it's better than nothing. As you're scrubbing dirt from your hands, William appears beside you. "Letter call came while we were digging," he says, holding out an envelope. "This one's for you." Your heart leaps. Mail from home is the most precious thing in camp. You dry your hands on your trousers and take the letter carefully. Your mother's handwriting. You'll save it for tonight, something to look forward to. "Any for you?" you ask William. He shakes his head. "Not today." Dinner is beans and salt pork, with coffee so weak it's practically brown water, but you eat every bite. One thing the army has taught you: never skip a meal. You never know when the next one is coming. As the sun begins to set, an unusual excitement runs through the camp. A travelling photographer has arrived and set up his equipment near the officers' tents. For 25 cents, soldiers can have their portrait taken to send home. "Should we do it?" Wilkins asks, genuinely excited for the first time in days. You check your meagre funds. 25 cents is a lot, nearly half of what you have left from your last pay. But the thought of sending your portrait home to your mother... "Let's do it," you decide. The line is long, but you wait patiently. When your turn comes, the photographer, a thin, nervous man with ink-stained fingers, positions you in front of a plain backdrop. "Chin up. Look brave," he instructs. You try your best to look like a soldier, not a frightened farm boy. The flash powder ignites with a bright burst and acrid smoke. That's it. In 2 weeks, if you're lucky, your mother will receive a tintype of her son in uniform. As darkness falls, campfires flicker to life across the vast encampment. Your company gathers around one, the familiar faces illuminated by the dancing flames. Someone has a harmonica and plays a mournful rendition of "Home Sweet Home" that makes your chest tight with longing. Now feels like the right time to read your letter. You carefully open the envelope, preserving it for a reply. Your mother's words leap off the page. News of home, how your father's managing the farm without you, your sister's new baby, you're an uncle now, questions about whether you're eating enough and staying warm. There's no mention of the war itself, as if by not acknowledging it she can keep you safe. The letter ends with a pressed wildflower from the meadow behind your house. The sight of it nearly undoes you. "Good news?" asks William, noticing your expression. "I'm an uncle," you manage, carefully tucking the flower back into the envelope. Around the fire, men share bits of news from their own letters, creating a patchwork map of home across the northern states. Stories of harvests and church socials and town gossips feel like dispatches from another world, but the conversation inevitably turns to tomorrow's march and what might lie beyond it. "My cousin was at Bull Run," says Thompson, poking at the fire with a stick. "Said it was pure chaos. Men running in every direction, couldn't tell friend from foe through the smoke." "My brother fought at Shiloh," another soldier adds. "Said the dead were so thick on the ground you couldn't walk without stepping on somebody. You listen silently, fear coiling in your stomach." These are the stories they don't print in newspapers, that recruiters don't tell wide-eyed boys signing their names. "Enough of that talk," Jenkins interrupts. "We'll face what comes when it comes. No use borrowing trouble." Wise words, but cold comfort as you return to your tent for the night. The canvas structure seems flimsy protection against what awaits you in the days ahead. You settle onto your bedroll, the straw crackling beneath you. Outside, the sounds of camp gradually quiet, the occasional laugh, a bout of coughing, the distant neigh of horses. Above the tent, through a small gap in the canvas, you can see stars dotting the night sky. The same stars shine over your family's farm, over the Confederate camps somewhere to the south, over a country tearing itself apart. Sleep comes fitfully, as it always does in camp. Your dreams are a confusion of home and war, familiar faces and nameless fears. Tomorrow, you march toward whatever waits beyond the horizon. What you don't know yet is that this relatively comfortable camp life, despite its hardships, will soon seem like luxury. The mud, the poor food, the endless drilling, all of it preparing you for something much worse. But for now, you sleep, rifle within arm's reach, surrounded by men who were strangers 3 weeks ago and now know your snoring patterns. In the morning, the bugle will wake you again and the next chapter of your war will begin. The bugle sounds before dawn, jerking you from what little sleep you manage to get. Outside your tent, the camp is already stirring, an anthill of activity as 15,000 men prepare to march. "Rise and shine, princess," Wilkins says, already pulling on his boots. "Today's the day we earn our glory." "Or our coffins," William mutters, but only you hear him. Breakfast is hardtack and lukewarm coffee. You've learned to pound the hardtack into crumbs and mix it with coffee, creating a grey paste that's easier to swallow than trying to bite the rock-hard biscuit. Tastes like wet cardboard, but it fills the stomach. By first light, you're standing in formation with your company. The morning air is crisp, mist hanging low over the fields. Captain Hayes paces in front of the line, his boots polished despite the mud. He's young for a captain, maybe 25, with a neat moustache and eyes that have already seen too much. "Men," he says, voice carrying across the silent ranks. "We march south today to join the main army, 10 miles at least. Light packs, full canteens. Any man who falls out will answer to me personally. 10 miles doesn't sound too bad. Back home, you'd walk that far, just checking fences." But that was without a 10-pound rifle, 40 rounds of ammunition, a bayonet, canteen, haversack, and everything else the army deems necessary. The regiment moves out with surprising order, each company filing into place on the road. From your position you can see the column stretching ahead and behind, thousands of men in blue, a giant centipede winding through the countryside. The early sun glints off rifle barrels and brass buttons. Flags snap in the breeze. It would be beautiful if it wasn't terrifying. "You know what's crazy," Wilkins says, as you settle into the marching rhythm. "More people in this column than live in my entire hometown." He's right. It's hard to wrap your head around. All these men from farms and factories and shops across the Union, now moving as one massive organism toward whatever waits ahead. The first hour passes easily enough. The road is decent, spirits are high, and some men even sing as they march. John Brown's body echoes up and down the line. You join in at the chorus, feeling a part of something bigger than yourself. Then the road turns to mud. Recent rains have transformed the route into a brown soup that sucks at your boots with every step. What was a steady march becomes a slog. The singing dies away, replaced by curses and laboured breathing. Your pack straps dig into your shoulders. Each step requires extra effort to pull your foot from the mire. This, Wilkins pants beside you, is bullshit. 2 hours in, and the first men begin to fall out. Not many, mostly the obviously sick or elderly, but enough to notice the gaps forming in the column. An officer on horseback rides alongside, shouting encouragement that sounds more like threats. Keep moving, any man stopping will face court-martial. By noon, your uniform is soaked with sweat despite the cool spring air. Your feet are screaming, blisters forming where your damp socks rub against poorly fitted boots. The column halts briefly beside a stream, officers allowing 15 minutes to refill canteens and relieve yourselves. You collapse on a patch of grass, legs trembling with fatigue. William sits beside you, face pale beneath a layer of road dust. Neither of you speaks, saving energy for what's ahead. Wilkins, somehow still energetic, drops down beside you and pulls off his boots. First rule of marching, he says, inspecting his feet. Take care of these, or you're finished. He produces a small tin of grease from his pocket and begins rubbing it on the raw spots. Got this from an old Mex War veteran. Sheep fat mixed with beeswax. Stops the rubbing. He offers you the tin. The grease smells rancid, but you apply it gratefully to your own blistered heels. It's disgusting, but feels instantly better. How far you reckon we've come? William asks, accepting the tin next. Wilkins squints at the sun. 5-6 miles, maybe. Halfway there, if the captain was telling the truth. The thought isn't comforting. The 15-minute rest ends too quickly. Back on your feet, back in formation, back to putting one foot in front of the other. The road climbs now, winding up a gentle hill that feels like a mountain to your tired legs. As you crest the rise, something new appears ahead. Wagons, dozens of them coming toward the column. Ambulance wagons painted white with red crosses. The column parts to let them pass, and that's when you get your first real look at war. The wagons are packed with wounded men. Some sit upright, bandages around heads or arms, eyes vacant. Others lie flat, moaning with each bump in the road. The worst are ominously still, covered with blankets despite the warm afternoon. Jesus Christ, Wilkins whispers, his usual humour gone. A soldier in a blood-stained uniform sits at the edge of one wagon, missing an arm below the elbow. His remaining hand clutches a Bible. He makes eye contact with you as the wagon passes, and you see something in his expression that chills you. Not pain, but a strange distance, as if he's looking at you from across an unbridgeable chasm. The wagons keep coming. 10, 20, 30. How many men? Hundreds, at least, all headed north, away from wherever you're marching toward. That's the 12th Massachusetts, someone in the ranks says. They got hit bad at Chancellorsville. The name means nothing to you now, but soon it will join the growing lexicon of battle names that every soldier knows, places where men died in droves. The column marches on, but the mood has changed. The reality of what awaits has been made flesh in those broken bodies. Conversation dies away. Even the officers ride more quietly. By late afternoon, your world has narrowed to the few feet of road ahead and the endless cycle of placing one foot before the other. Your shoulders burn from the weight of your gear. Your throat is parched despite careful sips from your canteen. Hunger gnaws at your belly. When the order finally comes to make camp, it's like a reprieve from execution. The regiment files off the road into a large meadow, already filling with other units. Tents go up with practiced efficiency, despite exhausted hands. Fires flicker to life as darkness falls. You sit with your company, too tired to even complain, watching the coffee boil in the shared pot. Your feet throb inside your boots, but you're afraid to remove them, not sure you can get them back on over your swollen feet. 10 miles, the captain said. Wilkins groans, lying flat on his back. That was 15 if it was a step. 16, corrects a new voice. You look up to see a lean, weathered soldier standing at the edge of your firelight. He's older, 30 at least, with a sergeant's stripes and a cavalry trooper's unmistakable bow-legged stance. "Saw you boys coming in," he says, squatting down beside your fire. "First big march?" You nod, too tired for words. He chuckles. "Gets easier. Sort of." He extends a hand. "Sergeant Michael Reeves, 8th Pennsylvania Cavalry." "You been fighting long?" William asks after introductions. Reeves nods, accepting a cup of coffee from Wilkins. "Since 61. Bull Run, Peninsula Campaign, Antietam, Fredericksburg." He lists the battles like stops on a familiar road. "What's it like?" you hear yourself ask. "The fighting, I mean." Reeves studies you over the rim of his cup. His eyes are green, you notice, but somehow darker than any eyes you've seen. "Ain't like anything they tell you," he says finally. "Ain't glorious, ain't noble. It's loud and it's confusing and it's..." He pauses. "It's men trying to kill each other is what it is." He must see the fear in your faces because his expression softens slightly. "Look, you're in a good outfit. 6th Corps has solid leadership. Stay together, do what your officers tell you, and most of you will make it through. Most, not all." The word hangs in the air. "Any of you boys know how to play poker?" Reeves asks, changing the subject. None of you do, but he teaches you the basics, using pebbles for chips. For an hour, you forget your aching feet and the long march ahead as you learn flushes and straights and full houses. Reeves wins most hands, but lets each of you take a victory too. As the game winds down, he becomes reflective. "Been at this 2 years now," he says, shuffling the worn cards with practiced ease. "Seen things I hope you boys never do. But I'll tell you this, it ain't the Rebs you need to fear most out here." "What then?" asks William. "Yourself," Reeves says simply. "Fear will kill you faster than any bullet. Man gets scared enough, he freezes up, or he runs. Either way, he's done for." He deals another hand, then continues. "But there's something worse than fear out here." You wait for him to continue, not sure you want to hear it. "Indifference," he says. "Seen it happen to good men. They stop caring, stop seeing the dead as people, start thinking of everything as just something to get through." He taps the deck. "That's when you lose something you don't get back." The conversation turns sombre after that. Reeves bids you good night, promising to look for you when the dance starts, as he puts it. Sleep comes quickly, despite the hard ground. Your body is too exhausted to care about comfort, but sometime in the dead of night you wake suddenly, unsure why. Then you hear it, screaming. Not battle cries or calls for help, but the terrible sound of a man trapped in his own mind. "Night terrors," William whispers beside you. "My uncle got 'em after the Mex War. Somewhere in the vast encampment, a soldier is reliving horrors in his sleep. The screams eventually stop, but sleep is harder to find afterward. Dawn arrives with the inevitable bugle. Your body protests every movement, muscles stiff from yesterday's march, but there's no choice. The army moves on with or without you." Breakfast is meagre. The supply wagons are running behind, the quartermaster explains. You divide hardtack and share coffee, everyone getting less than they need. As your company forms up, you notice gaps in the ranks. Some men who started yesterday aren't here today, fallen out, sent to the ambulance wagons, or simply disappeared in the night. Desertion is rarely mentioned, but everyone knows it happens. The second day's march begins like the first, but the pace seems slower. Men are already tired, feet already blistered. The road is crowded now with artillery batteries, supply wagons and cavalry scouts moving back and forth along the column. Around mid-morning, a new sound reaches your ears, a distant rumble like summer thunder, but in a cloudless sky. Artillery, says an older private named Davis. Big guns, 15-20 miles south. A murmur passes through the ranks. Battle somewhere ahead. The abstract suddenly becomes concrete. Your mouth goes dry despite the water in your canteen. The column presses on, the distant bombardment a constant reminder of your destination. The officers look more serious now, conferring in hushed voices as they ride alongside. By noon, new sights appear along the roadside, evidence that the war has passed this way before. A chimney standing alone, the house it belonged to now ashes and blackened timbers, fields trampled by thousands of boots and hooves, an abandoned cannon, its barrel burst from overuse. "Welcome to Virginia, boys," Wilkins says grimly. You're in the south now, enemy territory, though this part has changed hands so many times it's hard to say who it belongs to anymore. The few civilians you see watch from doorways with expressionless faces, neither welcoming nor hostile, just tired. A mile further, you pass something that stops conversations mid-sentence. A tree beside the road, and from one sturdy branch, a noose. It swings empty in the breeze, but the message is clear. Someone died here, whether deserter, spy, or civilian, impossible to say. The march continues through the afternoon, your feet moving automatically now, mind somewhere far away. You think of home, of your mother's cooking, of the soft bed waiting in a farmhouse hundreds of miles north. The distance feels insurmountable. Late in the day, rain begins to fall, a gentle shower at first, then a steady downpour that soaks through your uniform in minutes. Water drips from your cap into your eyes. Your already blistered feet now squish with each step, the wet leather of your boots rubbing raw skin. When camp is finally made, it's in a muddy field already churned by previous regiments. No fires tonight, the wood is too wet, and smoke might give away positions to enemy scouts. Cold rations, eaten in the rain, huddled under whatever shelter you can find. Your tent, pitched hastily in the downpour, leaks from a dozen places. You, Wilkins, and William sit in miserable silence, water pooling around your legs, too wet and tired to even complain. "My sister got married last Sunday," William says suddenly, staring at nothing. "Wrote me about it last month, said she wished I could be there to see it." The random statement hangs in the damp air, a reminder of the normal lives continuing elsewhere, oblivious to your current misery. "My girl's probably walking out with Jimmy Porter by now," Wilkins adds. "Told her not to wait, but she promised she would." You think of your own family, wondering what they're doing at this moment. Sitting down to dinner, perhaps. Your empty chair at the table, your father saying grace, maybe asking God to watch over his son. "Why'd you join up?" you ask Wilkins, realising you've never discussed it. He's quite so long, you think he hasn't heard. Finally, "Factory where I worked shut down. Army pays regular, at least." A pause. "You?" The truth is complicated. Patriotism, yes. Adventure, certainly. But mostly because everyone expected it, because saying no seemed harder than saying yes. Seemed like the right thing, is all you say. William nods, as if this makes perfect sense. My older brother died at Antietam, he says softly. Felt like I owed it to him. The rain drums on the canvas above. Somewhere in the vast camp, a harmonica plays a melancholy tune that seems to capture everything you're feeling. Sleep comes in fits and starts, your body too uncomfortable for true rest. Twice you wake to roll away from water dripping directly on your face. Morning arrives grey and drizzly. The march resumes, somehow even more miserable than before. The mud is deeper, the fatigue more profound, the muscles more sore. But something new enters the equation today. Anticipation. The artillery sounds are closer now, no longer distant rumbles but distinct booms that occasionally shake the ground. Cavalry couriers gallop past the column with increasing frequency, carrying dispatches to and from the front. You're close now, close to whatever awaits. Around midday, the column halts more permanently than the usual short breaks. Officers ride back and forth, conferring and pointing. The men use the opportunity to rest, though the air of tension prevents true relaxation. What's happening? William asks, though none of you have answers. An hour passes before Captain Hayes approaches your company. His uniform is mud-splattered, but his voice is steady. We'll be making camp here, he announces. The main Union army is deployed 3 miles ahead. We join them tomorrow morning. The news sweeps through the ranks like wildfire. Tomorrow you might see battle. As tents are raised and fires lit, rumours fly faster than cavalry scouts. The Confederate army is just beyond that ridge. No, they're retreating toward Richmond. Lee himself is commanding the Southern forces. No, he's miles away. The fighting will be minimal. No, it will be the biggest battle of the war. In this storm of speculation, Sergeant Reeves appears at your campfire again. He looks different today. Alert, focused, his cavalry uniform crisp despite the conditions. Thought I'd find you boys here, he says, declining coffee this time. Wanted to check in before tomorrow. What's really happening? Wilkins asks directly. Reeves glances around, then lowers his voice. Confederate forces are dug in along a creek about 4 miles south. Good defensive position. Our boys have been probing their lines since yesterday, looking for weakness. Will we attack, you ask, your mouth suddenly dry. Or be attacked, Reeves says with a shrug. That's for the generals to decide. Either way, your regiment will likely see action. He stands to leave, then hesitates. Listen, he says, looking at each of you in turn. First time under fire there's no preparing for it. Just remember your training. Load, aim, fire, load, aim, fire. Don't think beyond that. As darkness falls, an unusual quiet settles over the camp. Men write letters home by firelight, clean their weapons for the dozenth time, or simply sit in contemplation. A chaplain moves among the companies, offering prayers and communion to those who want it. You find yourself unable to write the letter you've been composing in your head all day. What do you say when tomorrow might be your last day on Earth? What words can possibly bridge that gap? In the end, you write simply, Dear Ma and Pa, we've marched to Virginia. I'm well. Don't worry. I'll write again when I can. Your loving son, Thomas. It feels inadequate, but it will have to do. You seal the envelope and give it to the company mail orderly, who promises to send it north with the next courier. The night deepens. Fires burn low. Around one nearby, a group of veterans from another regiment are sharing stories, not of battles, as you might expect, but of strange occurrences and superstitions. Swear on my mother's Bible, one bearded soldier is saying as you approach their circle. Saw a man at Fredericksburg take 7 bullets, centre mass, and walk away without a scratch. Had a Bible in his breast pocket, stopped the first one, and the rest just went around him somehow. Another veteran snorts. That's nothing. We had a fella in our company, night before Antietam, dreamed he saw his own grave with his name on it. Next day, first volley, bullet right through the heart. You listen, both fascinated and disturbed. These are the tales of the war that don't make it into newspapers or official reports. "You know what keeps you alive out there?" asks a third soldier, a sergeant with an empty sleeve pinned up. "Not luck, not skill. It's having something to live for. Man wants to see home again bad enough. Somehow the bullets miss him. Or having something worth dying for," adds another quietly. You return to your own fire thoughtful. Wilkins is cleaning his rifle again, though it's already immaculate. Williams stares into the flames, saying nothing. None of you mentions tomorrow. As you settle onto your bedroll for what might be your last peaceful night, you find yourself hyper-aware of everything. The scratch of wool blankets, distant laughter from another campfire, the occasional whinny of horses. Life, in all its messy detail, suddenly precious. Sleep, when it finally comes, is surprisingly deep. Your exhausted body overrides your anxious mind, and in the black hours before dawn, the bugle calls you to what waits ahead. The bugle tears through darkness, jerking you from sleep. For a moment, disorientation grips you. Where are you? Then reality crashes back. Virginia, the army, today, around you, the camp erupts into activity. Men stumbling from tents, officers shouting orders, the clatter of equipment being gathered in the pre-dawn gloom. No time for proper breakfast, just hardtack stuffed into pockets and cold coffee gulped down between preparations. Captain Hayes moves through the company, his face grim. Full battle gear, 60 rounds of ammunition per man. Fill your canteens completely. Your hands shake slightly as you prepare. Loading your cartridge box feels different today. Each paper-wrapped bullet might soon be fired at another human being, or might save your life. The weight of your equipment, normally annoying, now feels reassuring, especially the bayonet. As the eastern sky lightens to grey, your regiment forms up with the others of your brigade. No drums this morning, no bands playing, just thousands of men standing silently in formation, breath fogging in the cool air. Colonel Montgomery, your regimental commander, rides to the front. Even from your position in the ranks, you can see his face is deadly serious. "All men of the 140th Pennsylvania," his voice carries over the quiet ranks. "Today we join the Army of the Potomac in battle against Confederate forces. You will conduct yourselves with courage and discipline. Remember your training. Remember why we fight. For the Union. For freedom." The speech is brief, lacking the fiery patriotism of recruitment rallies. This is different. This is real. The regiment moves out as dawn breaks, marching in column along a narrow country road. After about an hour, you notice a change in the surroundings. Fence rails torn down for firewood, trees splintered by artillery, deep ruts in the road from gun carriages, the signs of armies. Then you hear it. Not the distant rumble of yesterday, but actual gunfire. Sharp cracks of rifles, the heavier boom of artillery. It's still some distance away, but unmistakable now. Wilkins glances at you, sweat already beading on his forehead despite the cool morning. "Guess they started without us." No one laughs. Humour feels strange now, out of place. The column quickens its pace. Messages pass up and down the line of officers. Ahead, you can see a ridge where other Union regiments are already deployed. Blue lines against the green hillside. "That's our position," Captain Hayes announces, pointing to an open field near the centre of the ridge. "We're reinforcing the line. As your regiment approaches, the sounds of battle grow louder. You can now distinguish individual volleys, the synchronized crash of hundreds of rifles firing at once. The ground occasionally trembles from artillery. Your mouth is desert dry despite water from your canteen. Your bowels feel loose. Veterans say it happens to everyone before battle, the body preparing to shed weight for flight or fight. Some men stop to relieve themselves at the roadside, ignoring the usual camp modesty. "Jesus," William whispers beside you. "Look at that." Beyond the ridge, smoke hangs over the distant tree line, white puffs from artillery mixed with the darker smoke of rifle fire. Through gaps in the smoke you can see flashes of movement, men advancing, retreating or falling. Colonel Montgomery halts the regiment at the base of the ridge. "Fix bayonets." The sound of steel blades clicking onto 1,500 rifle barrels sends a chill through you. This isn't drill anymore. You climb the ridge in line of battle, shoulder to shoulder with the men of your company, other companies ahead and behind. Every step brings the sounds of conflict closer, louder. At the crest, you get your first clear view of the battlefield below. It's nothing like you imagined. A creek runs through a shallow valley bordered by woods on the far side. Between the ridge where you stand and that creek is open farmland, now torn by shell holes and scattered with dark shapes you realize with horror are bodies. The far woods are shrouded in gun smoke, but you can see flashes of fire within, Confederate positions. Union batteries are positioned along your ridge, the artillerymen working their guns with mechanical precision. Every few seconds, a cannon fires with a deafening boom, adding to the constant crash of sound. Captain Hayes positions your company in a gap between two batteries. "We hold this line," he shouts over the noise. "Fire on command only." You stand in the front rank, rifle gripped so tightly your knuckles are white. Beside you, William's face is pale, his lips moving in what might be prayer. On your other side, Wilkins stares ahead with strange intensity. Minutes pass like hours. The Confederate artillery has the range of your position now. Shells explode on the ridge, showering dirt and deadly fragments. You flinch at each explosion, fighting the urge to duck or run. 100 yards to your right, a shell lands directly on a gun crew. The explosion lifts one man completely off his feet, throwing him yards away. Another crumples instantly. The survivors continue loading their cannon as if nothing happened. "Get ready," Captain Hayes shouts. Through the smoke in the valley, you see movement. A line of grey, Confederate infantry advancing across the open ground toward your position. Their battle flags flutter above them. Even at this distance, you can see bayonets gleaming. Colonel Montgomery rides behind your line. "Steady, boys. Hold your fire." The grey line advances steadily despite artillery tearing gaps in their ranks. They're within rifle range now, but still no order comes to fire. The waiting is its own kind of torture. The command finally comes when the Confederates are about 300 yards away. You raise your rifle, trying to steady it against your shoulder as you've practiced. But this is different from shooting at targets. These are men coming toward you, intent on killing you if they can. Fire. 1,500 rifles discharge as one. The noise is like physical force punching through your ears. The recoil slams your rifle butt against your shoulder. Smoke envelops the line, so thick you can hardly see. Through breaks in the smoke, you glimpse the effect of your volley. The Confederate line staggers, dozens of men falling, but they don't break. They continue advancing, and now they're returning fire. Bullets whip past with angry buzzing sounds. Some strike the ground, kicking up dirt. Others hit with the sickening thud of lead striking flesh. The man 2 spaces to your left jerks backward, a dark hole appearing in his forehead. He drops without a sound, dead weight. "Load," Captain Hayes orders. Your training takes over. Spite cartridge, pour powder, ram bullet, place cap. Each motion practiced hundreds of times, now performed with desperate urgency. Aim fire. Another volley, another shock of noise and smoke. The rhythm continues. Load, aim, fire, load, aim, fire. As if time has compressed into just these three actions. Your world narrows to the rifle in your hands, the choking smoke around you, the grey line still advancing despite your fire. You lose track of how many volleys you've fired, your shoulder aches from the rifle's recoil, your ears ring so badly you can barely hear commands, following the actions of men beside you instead. The Confederate line has closed to about 100 yards, close enough to see faces beneath the hats, to distinguish officers from enlisted men. Someone screams to your right, not the scream of fear, but the higher, more terrible sound of agony. You don't look, can't look. Keep loading. Keep firing. A new sound cuts through the chaos. The rebel yell. The Confederate line surges forward at a run, their high-pitched battle cry sending ice through your veins. "Stand firm," Colonel Montgomery shouts, riding behind your line. "Repel them with cold steel if—" His words cut off as a bullet strikes him. He slumps forward over his horse's neck, then falls heavily to the ground. The horse bolts. The Confederate charge reaches the bottom of the ridge and starts up the slope. They're only 50 yards away now, running hard despite their casualties. Captain Hayes draws his sword. Prepare to receive charge. You grip your rifle with bayonet fixed, heart hammering against your ribs. They're going to reach your line. This will be hand to hand. But then, movement to your left. Fresh Union troops arriving at a run, thousands of them, forming quickly into battle line. Their artillery unlimbers on a small rise, the crews working with frantic energy. A new thunder joins the cacophony as these guns open fire on the Confederate flank. The effect is devastating. Entire sections of the grey line disappear in explosions of dirt and smoke. The Confederate charge falters, then stops. For a moment, the battleground becomes a tableau. Blue and grey lines facing each other across a shrinking gap, the air between filled with smoke and death. Then the grey line breaks. Not all at once, but man by man, squad by squad, they begin falling back toward the creek. Their retreat quickly becomes general. Fire, pour it into them, Captain Hayes orders. You find yourself firing mechanically, reloading and firing again without conscious thought. The smoke is so thick you can barely see your targets. You're not sure if you're hitting anything, not sure if you want to. The Confederate retreat becomes a rout, men running, dropping equipment to move faster. Union artillery continues firing into their backs as they flee toward the creek and the woods beyond. And then, sudden silence. Not complete. Moans of the wounded rise from the field. Officers still shout commands, but the constant crash of battle subsides. You stand panting, ears ringing, surrounded by smoke that slowly drifts away on the breeze. Your rifle barrel is too hot to touch. Your mouth tastes of gunpowder. Your uniform is soaked with sweat and black with powder residue. "They're running," Wilkins shouts, voice cracking with emotion. "We beat them." But there's no jubilation in the line. Just exhaustion and stunned silence as reality begins to register. Men looking around, counting who's missing. William stands beside you, pale but intact. Did you see the colonel go down?" he asks, shakily. You nod, unable to form words yet. The image of Colonel Montgomery falling from his horse seems branded into your vision. Captain Hayes moves along the line, checking casualties. Your company has been lucky. Only 3 dead, a dozen wounded. Others fared worse. The company to your right lost over half its men. "Get water and ammunition," the captain orders. "This isn't over." He's right. In the distance, Confederate artillery still fires occasionally. Their infantry has retreated, but they're regrouping beyond the creek. This was just one engagement in what might be days of battle. The wounded are carried to the rear, where field hospitals have been established in farmhouses and barns. The dead are laid in rows, awaiting burial details. You help carry one of your company, a man named Ellis, who you barely knew, placing him gently beside others in blue uniforms. Hours pass in a strange blur. You help distribute ammunition, carry water to the artillery crews, build hasty breastworks along the ridge using fence rails and dirt, anything to stay busy to avoid thinking about what just happened, what might happen next. Late afternoon finds you sitting with Wilkins and William in the shelter of a stone wall. You're eating salt pork and hardtack, though none of you has much appetite. The food sticks in your throat, but you force it down, knowing you need strength. "I never fired a gun at a living thing before today," William says quietly. "Not even a rabbit?" Wilkins nods. "I kept imagining they were targets, like at drill." He pauses. "Except targets don't scream when they fall." You say nothing. What is there to say? You're all trying to process experiences that have no frame of reference in normal life. You boys made it then. Sergeant Reeves appears beside your wall, dismounting from his horse with fluid grace. His uniform is dusty, and there's a bandage around his left forearm, but he seems otherwise intact. "Your first taste of it," he says, sitting heavily beside you. Not a question. "Is it always like that?" you manage to ask. Reeves shakes his head. "No, sometimes it's worse." He accepts a drink from your canteen. "You held the line. That's what matters." "We killed them," William says, voice hollow. "We just killed them." "They were trying to kill you too," Reeves replies, not unkindly. "That's war." A shout from the ridge interrupts whatever else he might have said. Officers are calling men back to positions. In the distance, movement in the Confederate lines suggests another attack may be forming. "Back to it," Reeves says, standing. "Remember what I told you. Focus on the immediate. Load, aim, fire. The rest is..." He gestures vaguely. "The rest comes later. The expected Confederate attack doesn't materialize before darkness falls. Instead, both armies settle into an uneasy nighttime vigilance. Your regiment remains in position on the ridge, half the men awake at any time while others catch what sleep they can. You're among the first watch, standing in the darkness, rifle ready, staring toward where you know the Confederate lines must be, though you can see nothing. Occasionally, a flare illuminates the landscape, casting eerie shadows, or artillery fires blindly into the night. The strangest thing is the sound. Not battle noise now, but the moans and cries of wounded men still lying on the field between the lines. Men too badly hurt to crawl to safety, or caught in the no man's land where neither side can safely retrieve them. "Someone should help them," you whisper to no one in particular. "Can't," responds a veteran nearby. "Anybody goes out there gets shot. They'll send parties under white flags at dawn maybe, if both sides agree." The thought of wounded men lying all night in the darkness is almost worse than the battle itself. Some call for water, others for their mothers. Many just moan, a sound that seems to come from everywhere and nowhere in the darkness. When your watch ends at midnight, you find no rest in sleep. Nightmares jolt you awake repeatedly. Images of men running toward you with bayonets, of Colonel Montgomery falling, of faces you don't know staring with dead eyes. Dawn comes grey and misty. The valley below the ridge is shrouded in fog, obscuring whatever movement might be happening in the Confederate lines. The field of yesterday's battle is now fully visible, a landscape of discarded equipment, shell holes, and bodies. So many bodies. During the night, many of the wounded manage to crawl to one side or the other, but dozens remain, some moving weakly, others ominously still. Captain Hayes gathers your company. His face is haggard, eyes red from lack of sleep. "We're being relieved," he announces. "Another division is taking our position. We're to move north and then east to join a flanking movement." The news brings no celebration, just nods of acknowledgement. After yesterday, emotional responses seem muted, as if something inside has been temporarily switched off. Your regiment marches away from the ridge by mid-morning. The sounds of battle resume behind you.